Hi, I'm Jay West. Welcome to Directions. Good to have you here. Our second show with my good friend Bill Bowes. Good to have you back.
Good to be back.
If you watched last week or on my YouTube channel, we kind of left you with a cliffhanger right in the middle of a crisis situation where Bill's first wife is having a medical emergency, being transported to the hospital. And that's where we left off. And so we're going to just pick right up from there and continue the story. And there's so many directional changes yet coming in this show. So watch it to the end, share it with your friends. I'm sure you're going to be blessed and encouraged. So,
Well, thanks, Jay. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you and everyone. When we left off, Debbie was having CPR done in the ambulance in front of our house. I tried to get a hold of all the kids, all three kids. Went to Bellevue Medical Center. When I walked in, just a quick little kind of funny story at the time. I walked in and the nurse at the reception desk in the ER said, what are you doing here? And because I knew her from years past when I was a paramedic. And
right.
I said, Bellevue's bringing my wife in. And by then, Bellevue had made a radio call to the hospital. So she knew what was going on and, real quickly put two and two together. And I said, okay, let me take you back to the charge nurse, who I also knew. And she asked, do you want to be in the room with her as they're doing CPR, or do you want to be in the family waiting room? And I couldn't go into the exam room. CPR isn't a friendly thing to do, and there's a lot of things going on, and I just couldn't be part of that, which is kind of strange because of all the people I'd done CPR on through my career as a paramedic on the fire department. But something inside me just said, no, I can't do that. So we're in the waiting room.
You know what? It's a really dumb analogy, but I get this, okay? I remember years ago when my son was a baby, I was holding him and he threw up on me, okay? And it was one thing to have your own kid throw up on you. And then I was at the church helping. And a long story, I just volunteered. They needed help in the nursing one day, and a kid that doesn't belong to me threw up on me. It's like totally different. Like yuck.
It is, yeah. That's very true.
So,
it is very different.
Yeah.
So all three kids, a couple of the spouses came. We're waiting. Normally, when CPR is done on someone, they'll come back pretty quickly and survive, or they won't. And if they don't come back quickly, by the time we get them into the hospital, it might be 10, maybe 20 minutes tops that they'll continue CPR until they call it quits. In this case, time went by. Periodically, a nurse would come out and give us an update, which is basically, we're still trying, but there's not much there yet. And then eventually a doctor came out. Matthew and I knew, because Matthew's a paramedic also, that was a change. That was prepping us for bad news, which he and I had already expected, but the others weren't quite up on that yet. And then Mindy, so I said 10 to 20 minutes we'll do CPR in the hospital. This was close to an hour and a half later.
Wow.
They were doing everything. That medication you talked about last week, is there something they can give that can get rid of the clot? There is a medication that can dissolve clots. And if somebody's having a stroke from a clot or a pulmonary embolism that's not as severe as Debbie's was, they'll give that drug. It'll help dissolve it. Hopefully the person recovers real well.
Is there a way that they can determine it's a clot? I'm sure they can't just give medicine thinking it might be a clot.
From Debbie's past immediate history, medical history, and the presentation in the house and then the hospital, everybody knew it was a clot.
Okay.
There was no doubt at all. So they gave her that drug. They continued CPR to get that drug circulated through her system. Really slim chance of it working.
Sure.
But because they knew me, they wanted to give every chance possible. In fact, one of the ER docs who was off duty heard about it and came in to help out.
Mm-hmm.
So they did everything so well. And they went way above and beyond. And almost an hour and a half into it, Mindy said, I want to go be with Mom. And I said, okay, let me look at the nurse. And she said, okay, let me pull a chair in. And then something told me I need to get the boys too. So I went and got the boys. We all went into the room, and right then is when they called it quits. So that was it. Terrible moment.
Terrible. I'm sorry.
Just terrible. So
I I held Diane. She died in the hospital. Okay, and so I understand completely. I know the feelings. I know the agony, the helplessness. My story is a whole lot different than yours, but the outcome is the same.
Yep.
And your kids were there, my kids were there, your family was there, my family, my extended family was there. You know, she didn't get to say anything to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at least with Diane, she got to say 3 words, "I love you," and then she was gone 3 minutes later. You know.
Yeah.
So, but I understand, and if you've lost a loved one, you also understand. And but there's life after losses. He has one, I have one, and if you're in the middle and you're not there yet, you will have one. Okay, you will discover it, especially if you trust in God like we do. He's going to come through for you. And so, this is a good pause moment to just say, "Hey, we get it. We understand." One of my most recent shows was a lady named Jenny Langfeld, and she lost a 24-year-old son in a car accident. Similar story, but in another state, didn't get to be with him. So as we bring these directional changes to you, we're not just telling the story and how sad it was or how difficult it was or whatever, but that there's hope and there's life after that as well, in which Bill will share in a little bit. So continue on.
Yep. So we said our goodbyes there in the hospital exam room, because COVID was really just hitting initially right then. We couldn't have a funeral. And later on that day, the kids got together and decided that we would have a memorial service around her birthday in August, which is what we ended up doing.
When was her birthday?
August 26th.
Okay.
So we all went over to Debbie's parents' house, which was just like 2 miles from the hospital. My family, her family, she has 1 sister in town, 2 sisters out of town. Everybody who was in town got together at her parents' house that evening, and those things that you opened the first segment last week with. We're a part of a club that we never intended to be.
Right. I never signed up.
Never thought I'd be a widower.
Yeah.
Never ever. I always thought I would go first.
Absolutely, I did too. Yeah.
Men generally go first. So this was a shock. I described the first 10 days after Debbie died as being in a fog. I don't have a lot of memories of those 10 days.
My fog lasted 10 months. So
yeah, it's different for everybody. Yeah. And I say 10 days. 10 days was the heavy fog. And then I started to come out of it, but boy, it took a long time to find out what is normal. In fact, I don't know if I ever really found out what normal was again. It was just a terrible time.
At what point did you go through, on your own, did you go through Grief Share?
So,
because I've never asked you that.
I knew early on, somebody said something about grief groups, Grief Share. And I thought, okay, that's nice. I'm not ready for that. In fact, even reading grief books, it took me about 3 months before I was able to read those and wanted to read those.
Yeah, so, I couldn't read those. And people would send me songs they thought would be helpful. I couldn't listen to the songs. I had no interest.
Yeah.
How's a song going to replace a life of 40-some years, or you're 30-some years, 37 years you're married?
Right.
Diana and I were married 41 and a half. I mean, it just seems so inadequate, so not fulfilling.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I knew these grief groups were out there, but I wasn't ready for it until late September. One day it just hit me, okay, I think I'm ready to start checking into this. And
what year was that?
What year? 20.
Oh,
September
so not very
20.
long after, really.
Yeah. And from my experience now with Grief Share, because I help facilitate a class a year, somewhere in the 4 to 6 months after the loved one passes away is a good time to start Grief Share. You've gotten through the fog. You're going through the grief process, hopefully. I tell people I grieved intentionally. Whenever that grief would wash over me, I would go with it. I cried a lot.
Yeah, I did too.
And it's changed me because I cry much more easily now than I did before.
I would say I do too. Yep.
Yeah. Internally, I've changed.
I've been accused of being, since the death, and because I cry more, I've been accused of, by people that don't know me very well, as being insensitive or too sensitive.
Too sensitive.
Too sensitive. And I was like, okay, I'd rather be too sensitive than insensitive.
Yes,
I remember saying that.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
So I started looking around for grief groups. I didn't know Grief Share was the thing.
right.
And found Grief Share. Because it was COVID, there were a lot of churches that weren't offering it. And I found one at King of Kings that had just started. And I learned that it's a 13-week program. You can jump in and out as much as you want. Ideally, you go from beginning to end, but sometimes schedule doesn't always allow that.
Right.
So I started going to that Grief Share group. Francie Hines and Sharon Zender from King of Kings led it. Did such a good job. Oh my gosh, they are so good. And I got a lot out of it. It really helped me through the grief
lost
process.
her husband too,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Am I correct on that?
Yeah, Francie lost her
Sharon had
husband.
not, but-
Sharon lost a child
Yeah, okay.
early on. Yeah. So they, obviously have experience with loss, and they did a terrific job, and it's a really good program. So I went through that program, and I had a good friends of mine as well, a couple, Chuck and Lorinda, that were taking really good care of me, and they were walking with me through the grief. They'd have me over for dinner every couple of weeks or so. And by late October, they started talking about what does the future look like, which I hadn't gone there yet. And I said, I don't want to be alone. I don't believe I'm well designed to be alone in life. So I said, I hope God has somebody out there for me, but I have no idea what that looks like.
Or how to find them.
How to find them, dating. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was me dating. I've been dating the same girl for 43 years.
Yeah.
Counting our dating before we got married. I was like,
and what does it look like nowadays? I had no idea.
absolutely, yeah.
So they very slowly started to get me thinking about what does the future look like. And then November of 20, Pastor Murdoch from Trinity Church passed away. Went to his funeral, went out to lunch or dinner, I don't remember now what it was, with my sister, her husband, two other couples that I knew. And the wife of one of the couples said, so what are you thinking for the future, meaning in terms of relationships and stuff? And I said, I don't know. I hope there's somebody, but I'm not ready to start looking. But if somebody wanted to make an introduction, I'd be open to that. And my thinking was, if God's going to introduce me to somebody, why would I turn it down? Pretty simple.
So that's interesting. From your first thing, though, now God's part of more to the equation.
Yes.
Than he was when we talked in the first episode.
Yeah.
Tell me just a little snippet how that happened, how that changed. Was it just the death itself, or was it?
Debbie dying. Yeah.
Okay. So you ran to God, which is what I did.
Yes.
And I told people I knew I had a choice when Diane died. I could run to God or away from him, and I chose to run to him.
And same thing for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how somebody can make it through that grief, running away from God, I have no idea.
Right.
No idea. But I ran to him. Yeah. Oh boy, did I ever. I knew there was no way I could handle it on my own. And he was there in any number of ways, between books and Grief Share and friends and songs.
So you went through Grief Share. At some point, you became a leader in Grief Share.
So I went through that first session. I missed the first 3 weeks because I didn't know about it. So that spring, I went to the first 3 weeks and then talked to Sharon and Francie and said, I got so much out of this. I'd love to help others through it as well. So I co-taught with them that following fall, and then that following winter, Anita and I lead a Grief Share group now. So every spring, technically, from February through May, basically.
Because you were like co-leading when I went through it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that's where we began to meet.
So Grief Share was a great program for walking me through the grief.
It's 13 weeks. So
13 weeks, yeah.
Seems long, but once you get into it, it's not long.
Yeah.
Now,
It goes
you
by
missed
fast.
the first 3. I wanted to quit after the first 3.
You did. Yeah. And that's what they say typically. Give it 3 or 4 weeks, to figure out what it is.
I wanted to quit because all these people were crying and it wasn't helping me at all, But I was totally silent.
You were
nothing.
quiet.
I said nothing.
And then what happened?
But then God spoke to me and said, you need to start sharing, not just listening. I was like, I don't want to share. I'm in too much pain. I have too much hurt, but I stayed and I did start sharing little by little.
Yep. And I really think that's when the healing takes place, is when you start sharing. When you, and we found the same thing on the fire department for critical incident stress management back when that came out in the early 90s. You see a terrible accident, maybe a child was killed, which was my first real significant one. Sit around in a group and you talk about it. There's something healing about it. I don't understand the psychology of it, but it works.
Yeah, I'm sure all these groups from AA to whatever, they all sit around and talk.
Yep,
So,
that's it. It's a stress reliever somehow.
yeah. So go on.
So then
I know you dated at least one person I knew. I don't know how that happened.
through a former student of mine who lives in Arkansas, but we're Facebook friends.
Okay.
She said, there's this woman in Omaha, I think it'd be good for you to meet. So we met, had dinner, had a nice time. There wasn't a spark there, but that got me out and thinking.
She was actually a
more.
member of our church for several years. So
Yeah, it's pretty funny how a small world it can be at times.
yeah.
So after Pastor Murdoch's
And
funeral,
it's funny, she had never been married.
right,
believe.
correct.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. So after Pastor Murdoch's funeral, Ann, the mutual friend, asked me about it. The gear started spinning in her mind because she knew there was this woman named Julie, grew up in Fremont, went to Trinity, moved away, was married, moved away to Florida for 20 years, had gotten divorced in that time, and now came back to town. And Ann started thinking, well, maybe I could introduce Julie and Bill. So she talked to my sister about it. First, my sister was a little resistant, but then she thought, it might be good. So my sister introduced us after church one Sunday at Tribe. And
So Tribe's the name of your church? Just
Yeah.
for clarity, if people are watching. What's a tribe? Okay.
yeah,
cool.
Tribe Church.
It doesn't sound like the name of a church, probably, but
Ken Jensen's the pastor, does a great job. Love being there.
They meet in the Oakview Mall area,
Right.
next to Claxton Fireplace.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and Bloom Dance Studio.
Yep.
So my sister Beth introduced Julie and I on a Sunday. That Saturday we went out to lunch, and 4.5 hours later there was something going on in me. It was very unexpected. Didn't know I'd be ready for it, but it happened, and it happened fast. So I said last week, Debbie and I met in May, got married in July, or engaged in July, married in December. With Julie, we met in December, got engaged in February, married in June.
Let's do it faster.
A little bit faster, yeah. It happened fast, but it was a
I
wonderful
thought,
thing.
Diane and I met in February, got engaged in May, but didn't get married till the following August. So we we were in college.
A year
I
and
think
3 months?
Huh?
A year and 3 month engagement?
Yes.
Oof, I
Yes.
couldn't do it.
Yes. Well, we had to finish college. Okay.
Yeah,
But
good reason.
But with Rebecca, I met her in April and married her exactly 1 year later. So
Yeah.
much faster. Got engaged in 4 months. So
Yep.
so similar to you.
Yeah. So it wasn't anything I planned. It wasn't anything I thought about. But
Right.
boy, she was there, and she's been such a blessing to me. It's incredible. So Julie
you
is.
and Julie and Rebecca and I do some things together. And
Yeah.
sometimes they're not available. And you and I went to the football game on this last weekend, and so we've become friends out, as a result.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not just an interviewing person here on my show. He's actually a really good personal friend too. So he's on my prayer team, and just an amazing help. Was an amazing help those first few months after Diane was gone.
So it was quick. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Debbie and I have been married for 37 years, and I got married a year and 3 months after Debbie passed away. So it was a little fast for some of the family to handle, which I completely understand. Everything's good now, but it just takes a while.
I have a friend, and his wife, they were married like 10 years, a much shorter time. A lady wanted to come to the funeral. She didn't want to come alone, so she brought a friend of hers with her. That friend met my friend. They had a coffee the very next day. Okay, so he met her at the funeral of his wife, and then 3 months later they got married. So that was really fast.
I don't know if I can move that fast.
Yeah.
But it's Julie and I have been married about 3.5 years now, getting close to 3.5 years. It's been wonderful. We talk about Debbie We talk a little bit about her ex-husband because we both have these, I like to look at as
You got married
chapters in our
20,
life.
what?
21, June of 21.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So we have these chapters in our lives.
So you were actually married. I didn't realize that at the time. You were married to her when I first met you at Grief Share.
Yeah.
Because I hit Grief Share about September, late August, September. So.
Yeah, that's right.
So we have 6.5 minutes left, and we still have someone else to talk about. Share the God influence with you and Julie now that was different than you and Debbie, okay? At least, can you do that?
Yeah. So I think I'll tie it in this way. Julie is a sister of Ty Schenzel, and a lot of people know Ty and Terry, founded the Hope Center, died in a car accident in 2015, I think it was. So she knew loss. That was her only sibling. She knew loss. Like I said, she had, when she became a Christian after college, she started going to Trinity. So we had that in our background as well. And because I like to think because I ran to God after Debbie died, Julie ran to God after Ty and Terry were killed. At the same time, her divorce was going on. We both have grown in ways that we probably couldn't have imagined before that. So and being this stage of our lives, we understand the significance and importance of God. And we are all the more anxious to serve him in any way we can. I had been thinking about retirement when Debbie passed away. Wouldn't have been a good time after she passed away. Julie and I got married the next year. She said, don't retire right away. Let's be married for a little while before you retire. So I went another year and a half working, and then retired in April of 23. Yeah, April of 23, which was good to stay working during that first year and a half, 2 years of our marriage. And now we're heavily involved in Tribe. We like to coordinate, we call it the wisdom generation. Those of us who have a certain age should have a certain wisdom, but we're not sure of that all the time.
So do you remember, what was the first double date we did?
Ooh, boy. Was it going out to dinner somewhere?
No, I don't think so.
Or I don't remember, what was it?
I think the first time we did something together was in the parade.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I don't think Julie had met
Yeah, you're right.
Rebecca yet.
Yep.
Okay.
Was it the Ralston Parade, probably?
The Ralston Parade.
Yeah.
You drove the truck.
Yep.
You sat in the back. You guys sat in the front. When you say truck, the fire truck. So
Yeah, I always like driving the trucks in many of the parades around town.
I think that was the first time that we did anything together.
I think you're right, yeah.
So
It
interesting.
was kind of a unique thing.
Yeah. Kind of unique,
Being in a fire truck in a parade
yeah.
on a first
And
double
Jason
date.
came too.
Yeah,
My son came too. So yeah.
yeah, that was great. So now I've been retired a year and a half. Didn't have any solid plans for retirement, but now I believe God is leading me in a direction, and I plan on running for state legislature in 2026.
Okay, you jumped to this faster than I thought you would, but that's okay. So we got 3.5 minutes left. So tell our audience, what are some of the significant things that led to this decision to run for state legislator? And it's a year from now yet, but
Okay. Started probably 6 or 8 years ago. My sister-in-law from Rochester, New York, one of Debbie's younger sisters, we were visiting them. It might have been me alone because I went to do some work on their house one time. But we were visiting, and Kim said, have you ever thought about running for office? Just out of the blue, just no idea where that came from. No, I had never thought about it.
Right.
Never given it a second of thought. And at that time, I was fire chief in Papillion and was used to politics because I go to city council meetings, knew the mayors from both communities. So I understood the workings of politics, but never thought I'd get involved in it. And then a couple of years later, somebody else asked me out of the blue. And that's kind of strange that I would get that question twice. And
by the way, I'm going to interrupt you.
Mm-hmm.
As we share this story, this is election day of 2024. You're going to watch it after the fact, but millions of Americans are voting all over the country today. So, okay.
And we are anxious to see the results of that election today. And when people watch this, we'll know what the results are.
They will know, yes.
So then a third time it happened. I was at a seminar and was visiting with Gary Hoyt, pastor of Bellevue Christian Center at the time. It was during a break, we were just visiting, and he said, "Do you ever think about running for office?" Well, you're the third person to ask me that, and that's, I believe that's how God speaks to me sometimes too. He'll drop little hints.
And you guys know Ben
little seeds.
Ungerman, I know that.
Yes.
So how do you know Ben? He's a person. He was in our wedding. You were
From
in our
your wedding.
Okay, so
That was
Ben,
my first
Ben
time
is
I met
running
him.
for state legislator.
This
He was
session.
this session, and his election is today as we speak, and we have a minute and a half left. But he was Don Bacon's assistant chief of staff locally, Congressman Don Bacon, who I had on 3 weeks ago. And at one time, I was approached by a congressman in another state to be their chief of staff in Congress if he was elected. And so Ben was my, Congressman Don Bacon set it up, so I was being trained by Ben to be a chief of staff. Again, politics was not my thing. I pray with politicians, I meet with them. I met with one yesterday, I won't say who, but I met with a former governor in another state who's thinking about running for something else in the future, doing something else in his life. And so this is kind of what I do too. But I'm in those circles in a different realm than you are, okay? So now we have 40 seconds left.
I thought, okay, God must be telling me something here. So I started looking into it, met with John Arch, who is my representative in the state legislature right now. Good man. He encouraged me. We see eye to eye on most policy things.
And he's retired.
He is being term limited out at the end of 26.
So we have to stop. Can't go to a third show, but I'll tell you what, we'll have you back in a year when you get elected. How about that? Okay. So thanks for tuning in today. You've heard all sorts of directional changes. We both believe in God. Even if you don't, directional changes are important in your life. Make good choices, wise choices, and we are trusting that things will work out good for you. Thanks a lot for tuning in. God bless you, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.